And now it is an honor for me to invite Major General Amos Gilead, the Executive Director of the Institute for Policy and Strategy, the IPS, and the Chairman of the annual Herzliya Conference. I would just like to say that at the Herzliya conferences in the past, he, in my eyes, was one of the most popular speakers at all the conferences because of the way he was so acute and with his humor and his Zionism and his logical way of thinking, and because he's a mensch, as one says, a real humane human being. And therefore, it is no surprise for us that Professor Uriel Reichman, who is a major in his rank, mobilized the Major General in reserves in order to continue contributing to Israel from the IDC that is already contributing. And so together we can do even more. The floor is yours. We're slightly lagging behind, so I'll try and really focus on what I'm saying. And we can repeat all those lovely things that were said in my eulogy at my funeral. And I am swearing you to do that. I am really... Anyway, secondly, Professor Reichman, all the distinguished guests, I won't go over the whole list once again, but since Boaz mentioned the people at the IPS, I would like just to mention Hila Ziv. Professor Mintz knows her well from before. I hadn't worked with her before, and she is worthy of a medal, because during my entire term of service, have I ever seen such a devoted, dedicated woman who works in such a way, burning the midnight oil. So I'd like to just mention that at the opening. And I'm sure there's so many here, and my wife is here, that she suffered it all as well, but all the people behind the scenes. So thank you very much. I chose lights and shadows because we're at a crossroads. We have so many assets and cards in our hands in order to mold our futures, but the lack of decision in the Middle East is like a decision. And people, when they spoke about Professor Reichman, Professor Ganor mentioned issues of the lights and the shadows in our security, and Professor Melnick, Professor Ben-Dor will no doubt expand on that, and the various internal issues that they will touch upon. So I would like to focus on some of the strategic decisions that we face. I have concluded dozens of years in my military service. I never remember such a time when there was so much in the balance, wherein the decision is in our hands to be taken. And I will mention and enumerate the various assets. In an unprecedented way, we are now at a state with those moderate Arab countries. They wanted to destroy us. We talk about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And that's a murderous ideology and movement that wants to change and have a caliphate, and they want to change the whole Middle East, the Muslim Brotherhood. But they failed ultimately because of General Sisi. And I would just like to say that I'm not religious, but I'm starting to believe more and more in miracles, because otherwise I cannot understand how we're okay and how we're still resilient. What would have happened had there been a coalition in Egypt between the Turkish Akshi regime and the Muslim Brotherhood? We would have found ourselves in a totally different situation, detrimentally, of course, in detrimental terms. So now, of course, they were completely defeated, and he was appointed so that they would everything happened. Our whole Middle East would have changed, and most of the public don't even understand that. There's a kind of wondrous sort of setup of ties with various leaderships, I think. I think that we're talking, things are actually changing. We're talking about millions of people around us. When you look at Jordan, that is our actually eastern space. So that's the Hashemite Kingdom. Again, a miracle as far as I'm concerned. So many people who have said and assessed over the years, and they evaluated that this kingdom would be toppled, and yet, the king was ruling from 52, 53, and he passed away with cancer, which can happen, unfortunately, to any one of us. So for over half a century, he reigned. And for all those who did those assessments, they themselves have passed away. And he bequeathed the kingdom to King Abdallah. And I would just like to say that this kind of eastern security area between that and the actual Jordan River and Jordan, I mean, I cannot tell you what kind of actual Orbat actually is there, and the order, and really is strong for us. And we're talking about the Hamas wants to come, ISIS wants to visit, everyone wants to visit us, Hezbollah, all of them, and yet they're not actually coming. Look at the Allenby Bridge. I mean, every year 2 million people go through. Luckily, 4 million don't. It's simply, otherwise it's too volatile. It would just blow up, and then you can't have more people going through. So this is a wonderful asset, the fact that we have all these forces on the border, etc. And the newspaper, for example, collapsed because it was boring. And that and other things have happened. But if I expand and talk about other things that have happened, but this entire Arab space, we've got ties at different levels because of a common denominator against the Muslim Brotherhood, against Iran, against ISIS, and against all of them separately and together. Now let's continue enumerating the actual assets. ISIS is actually slowly fading. It is sort of waning. The terror will continue escalating, but we have to actually continue relating to it over the next days of the conference and at the conference on terror in September. But this whole issue of a caliphate that they all want to spread over the same area. But if I judge things correctly, it's a good harbinger of tidings for the whole Arab world. And I think that all the assessors and people who estimate the situation, I don't think that any traditional kingdom has become a victim to ISIS. Egypt is actually successfully contending with it, even more so than in the past. And I can continue looking at all the miracles. Now, if we look, Mr. Kostarikos is here, from the Chief of Staff from Greece, who has decided to honor us with his presence. And really he has uniting all these Chiefs of Staffs from the European Union, General Michael Kostakos, and he will speak with our Chief of Staff as well. He's the chairman of the European Union Military Committee. Now, in the past, what happened with Cyprus, and now the actual ambassador he was something else in the past, but he's now the ambassador and one of the pillars of security. And I remember the contacts with him. Greece and Cyprus and us, would we have peaceful ties? Well, I'd be delighted to tell you all that in the European, despite the whole European space, we've got a Western European kind of space, just like the Eastern one, and that's something that isn't published, and it doesn't sort of get rating, and therefore it isn't published. But all these things, instead of being advertised, do exist. And now, with the Palestinians, so many statements come out. According to my professional judgment, the Palestinian Authority, led by Abu Mazen, has various negotiations and talks with us. I don't think that they can take exclusive responsibility at the moment, especially not as long as they have lost the Gaza Strip and they can't take control of it again. But the whole coordination that we have with them, the security coordination, and secondly, the kind of cooling of with the various sort of winds with the Tanzim and others, enables an unprecedented kind of state of security, and we can actually coordinate most of our exercises really fully fledgedly, and that's an amazing asset. I'm not even relating to various publications about the incitement, instigation, and things like that. But if you look at the balance, that's the truth of it about the coordination, the military coordination with the Sunni world. That, believe me, is a tremendous asset for the state of Israel. Now, let's talk about the threats. And after that, I would like to just voice my opinion about the strategic threats that we are facing, and that is part of the actual lights and shadows that we're going to be spoken about and we have mentioned. Now, if we're looking at the nuclear threat, that the Iranian threat, it's very complex and it's made up of a very extremist ideology that wants to eradicate Israel, determination to develop nuclear weapons. After all, they're willing to freeze it for 10 years. That's what they said. They've got the know-how and the knowledge up to now. It's not that nothing new. But what will be new, and that is really a strategic warning, is that ISIS, the more it is shrinking and waning, it won't be a Jefferson democracy that will suddenly be established instead of it, or something from the Western world, but an alliance that is being consolidated in front of our eyes. Iran, Hezbollah, I call it, which is even stronger, which is a really strategic threat. Assad, Dr. Bashar Assad, who's an ophthalmologist who I do not recommend to actually treat your eyes, because I'm sure he'd be willing to take your eyes out, and he'd probably poison you with poisonous gas as well as taking your eyes out without any anesthetic. And he, unless someone shoots him, he won't actually leave. He's determined to remain in control, and Russia has taken a strategic decision to support this entire setup. We speak and negotiate beautifully with the Russians, but do not make a mistake, they are part of that alliance that is now established, and the day is not far when the head of the Intel who will come here, the commander of Intel who will come here on Thursday and talk about it, but believe me, there's going to be a front in the Golan Heights and the Hezbollah and everyone, with the support of Russia and Iran, who has already launched 3 missiles yesterday, and people have been poo-pooing and denigrating it, whether it hit the target or not. That's not the issue. But Iran intends to continue strengthening itself, where Israel is its main target. Now, this is a distinguished academic institution, and there's a tremendous knowledge about Iran, which will be spoken about in the next 2 days. There are those who believe that this regime will be toppled. We're talking about spirits of reform and other issues that we hear about. I suggest to be very cautious, even more so. I believe that the regime does not intend to disappear. We're not going to analyze it here, but I believe that they will survive far and beyond the period when they'll be able to develop nuclear weaponry. So we can talk about that later. Now, that is the main central strategic threat. Now, what is the main message that I would like to share with you? What does Israel need to do? Well, first of all, IDF have to be ready. The army is getting ready. The Chief of General Staff will be here today and he'll talk about it, I do not doubt. The readiness of the IDF from the assault point of view, offensive, defensive, and the deterrent side. I mean, the deterrence that we have nowadays is actually extraordinary from its point of view. The fact that we're not being targeted with missiles, not Hamas or other people, at least up to this summer, the central reason for that is because of our deterrence. That means that they fear that if they attack us, then they will actually find their end. So all these things together, alongside our intel development and our intel that is truly extraordinary. What, in addition to that, would I like to share with you? Vis-a-vis the Arab countries, there is an approach that has been published in the media, and it emanates from very significant factors wherein the Arabs will coerce peace on the Palestinians in a way that will be good for us. I actually disagree with that totally because of my experience. It may mean that I'm sort of fossilized and old-fashioned, but I honestly do not believe it. After all, this is just an evaluation, but I do allow me to disagree with that evaluation, that the Arab countries that are democratic in a certain way, they have a sensitivity to the Arab street that is identical to public opinion. They cannot sell the Palestinians. They cannot do it even if they want to. I don't believe that they want to. That doesn't mean that they feel affection towards them, but they are affectionate towards themselves. And the well-known model for some kind of political arrangement is the one that they will actually sanctify, that they will not wield pressure on the Palestinians and they will not expand ties with us, although people think that we're going to be able to fly to India over Saudi Arabia. All this normalization has not happened so far. El Al has not been allowed even up 10 kilometers even above it because we would be able to identify it, and therefore they do not allow us to fly over them. And what I'd like to say here is the question is whether we are not demanded to start those kind of political process. My dear partner, the General Staff, and other people are going to come, but I would like to say to the General Staff an evaluation about the Second Intifada and the murderous attack. And Ehud Barak, I think, who also spoke about him. That's something I evaluated. And Ehud Barak also I said the same to. But Abu Mazen is against terror, not because he's a Zionist, very remote from that. Even his PhD, he didn't talk about sanctifying the Zionist idea. He believes that terror is detrimental to them. But they believe that they have to stop the terror, curb it, in order to negotiate and find some kind of peaceful situation, and therefore they will support it. And there's a new factor that has suddenly popped out, and that is the President Trump.
US President, there are so many things published about him. I don't want to go into his characteristics. There's no need for that. But instinctively, he decided to promote the peace process as a top priority. And he is sending his advisors, his most close colleagues, and that is after he has changed his approach to the Arab states, and he is now heading the Arab Sunni bloc in against the Iranian threat. And I would like to share with you that the consolidation of the Arab bloc in its entirety, even if there is slight normalization under the leadership of the United States against the Iranian threat, it is our order of the day. The reason is that Iran is the one threat that can potentially be existential in the event that Iran has nuclear weapons. The reason is simple. First of all, nuclear weapons. If Iran should have it, we will build our Western logic that they will not dare attack us, but I would not depend on that. The best way to ensure that we are not attacked by nuclear weapons is that they don't have it. Second, if a hostile state, Syria almost had nuclear weapon, Iraq had, according to open sources, and the same is true for Libya, if they have nuclear weapons, our deterrence will be null and void because we will look like Samson after having bit the hairdressers. So we'll have no force, no strength, with a low self-image, and that will motivate terrorism. I would like to quote Rafsanjani, who had passed away, and Admiral Rafsanjani. And these very nice people once said, Rafsanjani, of blessed memory, who seemed to have drowned in the pool, so it looks to me like they had accelerated the process, but maybe I'm just misquoting, but he said it's enough to just send one bomb to Israel. They're not even speaking loudly, they're speaking quietly, which is even more scary. And Shamkhani said 15 years ago that our deterrence will be built on nuclear weapons as well. I'm just paraphrasing briefly, but they believe in it, with all their hearts. And the only reason that Rouhani has won the elections is because he's completely incompatible. He's completely inappropriate. His worldview is scary, his record is scary, his performance is scary, but he has one good advantage. He believes that if they don't save Iran financially, then it will collapse even before it is a threat. And it's probably true, and that's why he's winning the election, because Khamenei, the leader, seems to be against him. I don't think he really is against him. I think he's essential to him in order to put Iran back on its feet. But if it is financially put back on its feet, that's very bad for Israel, because if the alliance is indeed set up. Now, strategically speaking, aside from militarily being prepared, I am against using the army if there is no need. Israel is a democracy, and its experience shows that wars are only successful if there's no other option. Therefore, we need to develop alternatives, and the alternatives need to be the opportunities we have. The U.S. leadership and administration, we can analyze whether there can be a peace process. I have never been optimistic in that respect, and probably never will be for various reasons, but we must go into the process headed by the United States with the Arab Sunni world as a part of the wondrous relationship that has developed with us and the Arabs, and based on the friendship with the United States, headed by the President Trump. as part of his overall preparation against Iran, which we will not go into right now. So in the Middle East, this wondrous place, not taking action or not making a decision is like making a decision. If we don't make decisions, we will sink into a reality where if conflict comes around, and I personally don't think that we can go into a vast conflict with Iran if we do not collaborate with the United States and so forth. I think that is just delusional. I believe in the IDF, I believe in the Israeli Air Force. I'm very happy that the commander of the Israeli Air Force will be here and honor us with his presence and will speak in a few months. But that really is great power that is developing and evolving, but we should indeed remain deterrers rather than to go into action unless the US is heading us. Now, there is Pax Romana here. When President Trump, unlike the past, does not engage in the question of whether there will be democracy in the West, in the Arab world, I think that is just completely impossible. He says, you're stable, I will embrace you. And that is a very realistic approach. You can disagree with it, you can disagree about anything. But if that is the banner he is holding up, and that is why his senior advisors are coming around, and some people think nothing will come of it, and perhaps that's true, but that is the decision to be had. And if we do not make that decision, I think Abu Mazen is not preparing his heirs. That is one of the problems. There's no heir being prepared, and he probably thinks he's eternal, and that probably won't pass the test of time. But if he retires next year or in 5 years' time, there are no clear heirs, no successors. And if we are in a reality of a political peace process, I'm going to say very cautiously that we will go into a series of violent events, of terrorism, and we will not come out of this tough connection to Judea and Samaria and the Palestinians. We want to part with them politically, otherwise we will sink into a bog. In the past, we may have been deluded and we thought that we could postpone. Postponing is always the easiest option. You feel like you've made a decision because you postpone it, but we have come to a crossroads and we cannot make this decision. If we don't make the right decision, if we don't enter this Arab bloc, we will be losing our legitimacy. Here at the IDC, we sanctified the BDS. And for good reason. But if the BDS, as well as the outstanding preparation in the IDC that will be manifest in the conference, if it doesn't meet the reality of a peace process as the Western world wants, headed by the United States, we will not, in my opinion, we do not have any chance of a good reality. It will be a very bad reality, and even struggling against the BDS won't help. I was deeply connected to the security relations that was evolving with Europe, but it's slowly getting disconnected from political reality. A colleague of mine from Germany, I don't want to mention him by name, he says public opinion is getting further away from me. Even the Chancellor will not be able to help if she is re-elected. In a security sense, yes, because she's committed to our security. But politically, we are not being supported in this sense. We need to see reality in the eye. We now have an opportunity. We have Arab relations, and I want to reiterate that, only because it is important. But also we have the United States support, and that is a strategic message that I would like to convey to you alongside other messages. The national resilience and the national security are one and the same. And under the lights and shadows, the opportunities and risks, we will discuss it. Don't want to discuss it now. I would like to discuss it in the other forums that will be doing it a much better job than I am. But alongside what has been said by Professor Uriel Reichman on these sensitive matters that somehow are not resonating here in Israel and not being publicized because they're not fascinating, is an existential threat. And alongside other issues such as economics and the gap between micro and macro, Professor Melnick talks about, and other issues that we do make note of, if they are not met, if they are not responded to properly, then our abilities to meet the challenges will also diminish. And I believe in the IDF and in the Israeli Air Force, but I don't think we have the tools to battle with internal challenges. But I will not say more than that. I would like to wrap up by saying that our security situation is one of the best we ever had. We usually used to say when terrorism will end, we will take political action. But when the security situation is good, they say, okay, so what's the problem? Why rush into decisions because we're in a good situation? And when the situation will be bad again, they'll keep saying the same thing again. But the difference is, compared to the past, and I don't think we have time, it looks to us like we have all the time in the world, but we don't. And that is because of the security situation. Since we have good security, we have a good economy, and tourism is high, but it all depends on our decisions. Therefore, we have called this conference in preparation for the 70th anniversary of Israel opportunities and risks, because we know many strategic issues and we should really take pride in all of our assets, but these things are very fragile and they will not give response to our other challenges. I would like to thank once again all of you. I tried to be succinct primarily because of lack of time. Thank you so much to all the teams who have organized this conference. I think their job was absolutely well done. I would like to thank Professor Reichman and the entire IDC team. All the people have already been mentioned. Thank you very much. Enjoy the evening, enjoy the conference. We have quite a few keynote speakers still to hear. Thank you very much.